everyone, Anna Marie from Just Stamp here. I am here for November's online card class, and hopefully you are watching this in the landscape orientation. That way you can see everything that's going on my desktop. So let me just click over online and make sure everything's going right. And let's get started. So this is a class for November. Much better. So much better. So this class is going to be presented for you tonight. It will also be presented on Saturday, November 20th, live and in person. So if you're local to me in Riverside, California, and you'd like to create the cards that we are making tonight, please join us. Class includes 8 cards, but we're going to be making 2 of each card. And the class fee is only $20 or free with a qualifying purchase. So I hope you can join me. If you are not local, my other option is, if you would like to place an order online, $35, I will send you free of charge all of the materials to create the 4 cards. If you'd like to bump your order up to $50, I will also include the gems that we are going to be using for these projects free of charge. So 2 options. You can join me live and in person to create these cards, or you can place a order online using my host code, and I will post that right above this video so that you can get the kit to make these 4 cards. If you, and that qualifying order is just $35. If you want to bump it up to $50, then I will send you also the wonderful gems that are featured in this card class. So let's get started. First of all, you might be familiar with the stamp set I am using. I'm using actually a couple of stamp sets in the Painted Christmas Suite. There is the stamp set called Christmas Season and Christmas to Remember. One of them has the sentiments, Christmas to Remember, and one of them has the art images. So I'm using both stamp sets. I'm using both of the coordinating die sets called, let's see, Seasonal Labels and the Christmas Pine Cones. And I will call out the materials and the dimensions as we work along. So let's get started with the first card. This is card number 1. And this is, May This Be a Christmas to Remember. And let's see, we are going to be working on, I'm going to put this up here for reference. It helps me out to know what I'm shooting for. This is built on a basic white foundation. The card base is basic white, and this is in the vertical orientation. So it's a 4.5 by 11 inch cardstock. And I have pre-scored it right down the middle at 5.5. My next layer is going to be Early Espresso. This one measures 4 inches by 5.25. I'm going to put my card base aside. We're going to build our card before I actually put it on the card base. My next layer is the pine cone pattern from the Painted Christmas 12 by 12 designer series paper. This one is going to be layered right atop of the Early Espresso. I do have a label from the Seasonal Labels. That's where I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I have pre-cut one of the large pine cone sprays from the pine cone dies, and I've snipped off just a portion, so that's what we've got going on there. I have also die cut 3 of the smaller pine cones that are included in that die set. I did both the detail die cut and the outline die cut. And I went ahead and cut these before, so you wouldn't have to watch me just die cutting. I will do a little bit of die cutting on camera so that you can see how this is working along. So do me a favor, go ahead and post a comment if you're watching. And let me know who you are and where you're watching from. All right, so let's do our stamping first, then we're going to do our card assembly. The first thing is I'm going to stamp my sentiment, and I'm going to be using Evening Evergreen ink. I'm using 4 inks on this card set, and I'm going to stamp using the sentiment, May This Be a Christmas to Remember and Cherish. Really nice Christmas sentiment. And I'm just going to tap, tap, tap into my ink pad. I'm going to bring this in a little bit better so that I can get it right in the center, stamping down firmly. Hopefully I get a good impression and I'm happy with it. So I'm going to put the ink aside so I don't get inky. All right, so we did our stamping. That was pretty easy on this card. Now we're going to do some assembly. We're going to do our layering. And for that, I am going to be using, my multi-purpose liquid glue. So I have an open bottle here. This is my favorite adhesive. It's really economical. It's very forgiving. And it is my general purpose adhesive. So I'm just going to do a small trail of liquid glue. And I'm going to turn that over. This gets centered right onto the early espresso layer. Let me pull my stamped image out of the way. And I'm just going to, whoops, that kind of slid over. And that's exactly what I love about the multi-purpose liquid glue. You can just tweak it as you need to. You're not committed as soon as you put it down on the layer. Okay, so there's my first layer. Then I'm going to add my spray of pine cones and alpine branches here. I'm going to put a little bit of liquid glue and I'm just going to put in the wider areas. Really, really small amounts. I don't want to get messy, but I do want the little pieces to kind of stay down in position. It makes it much easier when you're slipping the cards in and out of the envelopes. So just putting a tiny, tiny dot in strategic places. I'm looking for little areas that have a little bit wider cardstock. All right, so then I'm going to flip that over, position it right like so, and I am going to flip this over, go off to the side there. And you can kind of see I'm off on the side here because I don't want to get my fingers sticky. And I do want it burnished on there. So my next step is I'm going to bring in some of this lovely evening evergreen open weave ribbon, and I'm just going to wrap it around this layer, and I'm going to tie a knot. I'm not going to worry about a bow, just a very simple knot. So my tip on this is to make sure that you don't have any extra twists or turns in the ribbon. You just want it going one way. I do a perpendicular turn. You can see how I hold my finger down there to get a nice knot in the middle. And I'm actually not very happy with that, so I'm going to give it another try and I'll walk you through it. So I usually like to bring up the bottom, take it to the left, wrap it around, and then bring it right through the knot in the middle. So that's better. I'm happier with that, so I'm glad I redid that. The next thing I'm going to do, now I'm going to go ahead and put it onto my card base. And again with the liquid glue. This is one of the most beautiful suites in the holiday catalog. It features a lot of products, a lot of pretty paper, beautiful colors, so you can go very natural or you can go brighter with the reds, or keep it natural with the browns and that pretty green, that evening evergreen. All right, and again, I am going to flip that over and burnish it down. So I have nice contact. My layer is going to stay intact. There we go. And next, I'm going to go ahead and add my sentiment layer. This is going to be popped up with standard dimensionals. I'm just going to flip that over and put it in a couple of strategic places, one top and bottom. I'm going to put it right over where I have the ribbon. Kind of center it like so. And we're going to embellish with little pine cones. And to secure these layers, I'll share with you what I like to use. Mini glue dots are my preferred adhesive on this, and I even like to use the glue dots that I save out of the card kits. They come in really handy. I do like to use my pick a tool to bring in or go underneath the dot and make sure I'm getting the dot and the covering. So you can see I'm just working pretty quick. And I'm going to put one towards the top as well. And the pick a tool, or take your pick tool, comes in really handy for lifting the dots and lifting the covering. And then what I'm going to do is just layer up with that detailed die cut. And it goes like so. Look how cute. I love the 2 layers, lots of detail with that top layer. Now that one's going to go right onto the label. I'm going to keep building with my pine cones. And these pine cones were cut in early espresso. The colors are taken right out of the designer series paper. That's, of course, one of the things I love about Stampin' Up! Is all the color coordination. It's the right brown, the right greens, the color combos all work so nicely together. The colors, again, were pulled out of the Painted Christmas 12 by 12 designer series paper. All right, that one's kind of dancing around on me. All right, now I am ready to adhere. Now the bottom one's going to be adhered with just a little dot of liquid glue. I'm going to put it right in place, bring it in right like so, right at the wider part of the label. The next one as well, I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to put it in at an angle since it's kind of going off of the label, which has been stacked with a dimensional. I'm going to put a mini dimensional behind this one. So I do like to have both sizes of dimensionals nearby, and I'm just going to put it like so, bring it out. And then my final one I'm going to put also to the side here, and I'm going to put a mini dimensional at the bottom of the pine cone so that I'm not double stacking. And then I do want it to secure onto the label, so I'm going to put a little dot of glue, just like so. And it's going to be pointing right up here. All right, and we have just a couple of things left to do. We're not done until we embellish. And let me see where my jewels are. Looks like I have them off to the side over here. So for these cards, I'm using the Wonderful Gems. What I like about these gems, there are 2 sizes of 2 colors. So we've got a pretty real red gem and like a very vanilla gem, 2 different sizes. So on this card, I'm using the very vanilla gems, and I'm going to bring them in on the label and hover them around the sentiment. One up here, and then I'm going to put one off the label. I'm going to use the larger one right up to where the pine leaves meet the little label. And there you go. There's card number 1. Whoops, let's do a little bit of cleanup here. So what I want to do is trim this ribbon. It's a little bit unruly. I just want to make it a little bit tidier. Trim it down. And ideally, I would like this one to point up. Let's see if I can do that a little bit easier. I do have 2 pair of paper snips. I have one for ribbon and one for the paper. So I'm going to push that aside so you can see the sentiment. There you go. So card number 1, very simple but elegant with that designer series paper and the detailed pine cones there. So there's card number 1. Let's carry on to card number 2. Another nature card with the pine cones. Same kind of color scheme. I am using a couple different elements on this card. We're still going to start with the basic white card base. I have a layer of Evening Evergreen that measures 5.5 by, let's see, let me measure that so I make sure, 3 3/4. I have the pine cone pattern of just pine cones. This one measures 3 inches by 5.5. I have one of the medium-sized labels from the seasonal labels, and I'm also going to be using the small label from the same die set. I have some die cuts here that I'm going to be stamping. So I have a little branch of leaves, and then I have 2 pine cones, the large and the small. And to make it easy for myself, I have pre-stamped and pre-cut the little branch of berries. But I will show you how I did those. It is a little bit tricky to do. So let's start with our stamping first. I'm going to push this aside for my reference, and I'm going to bring in my inks. I am going to start with my Early Espresso, and I'm going to do some stamping with my pine cones. And because these stamps are photopolymer, so the label stamps are red rubber, the art images are photopolymer, so I do like to have my piercing mat so that I get a good impression. And I'm going to start with my larger one. This is the larger pine cone. The pine cones are two-step stamping. The base layer is the one with more area covered on the image. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to stamp onto my Early Espresso. Pardon me for reaching up. But before I stamp onto my pine cone, I am going to stamp off and then stamp my pine cone. Now let's see if I can stamp this nicely because I pre-cut it. Usually my rule of thumb is stamp first, then die cut. But I didn't want to have to do a lot of die cutting for you on camera, so I pre-cut them. And once again, I'm going to now do the detail, the second step, but I'm going to stamp off again, and then I'm going to come back in and do my second step. And voila, there's my first pine cone. I'm going to do the same with the smaller pine cone. Two-step stamping and two stamps. I'm going to start with my more solid image, and I am going to stamp off, and I am going to stamp my die cut and do the same again. I'm going to do my second step. So stamp, stamp off, and then do my die cut. And there you go. So there are my two pine cones. I'm going to go ahead and do that branch as well. The branch is in Evening Evergreen, and I'm going to stamp, and this one's going to be full inking, so I'm going to do my tap tap, and then I'm going to come in and stamp on the branch. Because these are photopolymer stamps, it is pretty easy to get a nice image on that. I wouldn't attempt this with the red rubber. It's a little bit harder to place in the exact spot. So this, with them being clear, I can see exactly where I want to stamp. All right, so there are my images. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of detail to the label itself. I'm going to start with that little spray of pine needles, and I'm again stamping in Evening Evergreen. I'm going to do a couple of inkings. I'm going to do one towards the top, one towards the bottom there. All right, and I have one more thing to stamp. I'm going to stamp in Real Red. I am going to stamp my label, 'Tis the Season. And I'm just looking around for my Real Red ink pad. Here we go, right there. And this is going to be stamped onto the smaller label. So this is more difficult. This is going to be that red rubber stamp that I'm going to attempt to put right on the label. Hello, Gabby. Thanks for joining me. I am creating November's card class using the Painted Christmas Suite. And we are stamping 4 cards. And there we go. 'Tis the Season. That's going to go onto that label. And I think that's all the stamping I need to do. Now all that's left is the assembly. So, I did say I was going to show you how I did the berries. They are a little bit tricky. So the berries also are 2-step stamping, and it's kind of tricky to get the stem in the right spot. So what I like to do is first do the berries. And so I stamp down on the berries, and let's see, goes like so. And the second step is going to be the, let's see, trying to figure out the orientation here. I think I need to redo those berries. we go. And see, it does matter. So there we go. You want that stray one towards the bottom. The branch is an early espresso. And now that I have the berries in place, I can come in with the second step and align these a little bit better. And I have more success, like I say, when I do the berries first. So not bad, it's pretty accurate. And as I said, I did pre-do those for you so you don't have to watch me cranking. And let's start our assembly. So we're going to bring in our card base, which is basic white. It is still the vertical orientation, so 4 1/4 by 11, scored right in the middle at 5 1/2. And I'm going to bring in my Evening Evergreen layer, and right atop I am going to layer the pine cones, and it is flatted here, so I'm using just the Tombow liquid glue, and I'm just putting a trail. I don't want it oozing out. This is going to be centered right in the middle, so edge to edge up at the top, and then equal border on the right and left. Go ahead and burnish that down, and this layer gets adhered to the card base. So just liquid glue again, and I'm going to start at the top. It's usually easier for me because if I do have to do any snipping, it's easier to snip from the bottom than it is to snip up at the fold. So what I'm looking for is equal border on the right and left. There we go. And I think it's just a tad off. Let me pull it over. Better. And I'm going to burnish that down. And this is my opportunity to fix the layer. You can kind of see my layer's a little bit longer than the card base. So what I'm going to do is clean that up. At this point, I'm going to bring in my mini trimmer and just trim that down. Whoops. There we go. Much better. You can see now it's even there and there. So fold that down. And next I'm going to build my label. I'm going to start with my branch, and it's going to fall off the label, so I'm not going to put adhesive all the way at the tip of the leaves, just towards the bottom. This is going to come up here, kind of like so. Adhere that down. The large pine cone at the back gets flat adhered. And I'm just going to bring that over right around there. And I'm going to, before I secure that down, I'm going to see if I can bring in my berries here. And I'm going to put a little dot behind a couple of the berries so that they stay in position. There we go. The front pine cone gets popped up with a dimensional, and I can use the standard dimensional here. And I'm just going to go ahead and build that like so. And I am now ready to transfer this label right onto the card base. It's going to be flat adhered, so just a little bit of adhesive at the back. And I'm going to bring it right in here. And I'm just going to try and come in with my bone folder and secure that down. All right, I'm going to bring in my 'Tis the Season greeting. This is going to be popped up with dimensionals, but not over where the pine cone goes. So I'm going to leave the dimensionals off to the left. I am going to use a couple of mini dimensionals. And this goes right in place around there. And I have a pretty little Evening Evergreen bow, which was pre-tied. And I'm going to secure that with a glue dot. So let's see if I can bring in my glue dots. And these are on the tape. They're a little bit more sticky than the sheets of glue dots. And it's going to go right underneath where the pine cone is. And there you go. I kind of like the longer tails on the ribbon. All that's left to do is some embellishment with the wonderful gems. Again, I'm going to use my pick a tool, or take your pick tool. I'm going to come in and just put a couple of these randomly on the label, large and small, and one just off the label, like so. And there you go. There's card number 2 for November's card class. 'Tis the season. I'm going to put that aside. And we're going to carry on to card number 3 for the class. So next I am going to be working with a little bit brighter colors. I'm using Real Red and that pretty garden green. And this garden green has been soft embossed with the Wintry 3D embossing folder. And you can see I also added some extra embellishments, those gold leaves that coordinate with this suite. So let's see, this is Friends Like You, Make the Season Special. And I'm going to put that right up there for reference. This time my card base is Real Red, and it's the horizontal orientation. So this one measures 5.5 by 8.5. It's been pre-scored down the middle at 4 1/4. I'm just going to fold and burnish, and I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. We're going to do our stamping first. Here is the label, and last time I used the label horizontally. This time I'm going to use it vertically, and I do need another branch of berries that I have pre-stamped and pre-cut. This label is stamped in Real Red ink, and Friends Like You comes from the same stamp set, Christmas to Remember. And I'm just going to do a nice inking onto the label. There you go. Push that aside. All right, I'm ready to build my card. I'm going to bring in my card base, and I'm going to start with the garden green, which measures 5 1/4 by 1.5. It has been pre-embossed. I don't know if you can see those pretty pine branches. And I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive on the edges, right like so. Now, if you are on my mailing list, you will have received a tutorial today, also featuring this same suite. I used the sentiments from Christmas to Remember for the exclusive tutorial that goes out only to subscribers who are on my email list. So if you're not on my email list yet, I will put the link right above this video so that you can join and start receiving exclusive tutorials only for email subscribers. And this piece measures 5 1/4 by 2.5, and when I place it down, I leave the tiniest little seam right down the, it's not quite the center because this measures 2.5, but you can see I have a little bit of red peeking through there just for a little extra color. So this label goes on with the dimensionals. I'll use standard size dimensionals, a couple right in the vertical center. This gets put right like so, and I'm kind of off center there. We are going to next bring in 2 of those pretty gold leaf embellishments that are part of this suite. They're kind of delicate. They're like really soft, almost like a fabric. So what I like to secure them with is a glue dot. So I'm going to bring in my mini glue dots on the tape, and I'm just going to grab a glue dot without even touching it, bring it up, and go direct to paper. And then I'm going to do the second as well. This adds a nice pop of glitter. And I'm going to bring it at an angle. Then I'm going to bring in my berries, a little branch of berries, and I'm going to put a mini dimensional down here at the base of the berries, right in here. And this comes down. It's going to go right up the middle. And then this one is going to get a little real red bow, and it's been created with the real red sheer ribbon. I'm going to attach that just with a mini glue dot. And I'm going to bring it in and I'm going to put it right there on the branch of berries. And let's add a little bit of sparkle. I'm going to use the vanilla gems, and I'm going to just bring them around the sentiment. Let's see. And there you go. There is our third card. Friends Like You Make the Season Special, still featuring the painted Christmas. So let's continue on. We have one card left. This is card number 4. And this one also is a little bit brighter, has more color. Have a Holly Jolly Christmas, still using the same painted Christmas paper. And I've added some of the gems and the pine cones. We do a little bit of stamping. This one has a scalloped label from another die set. I've neglected to write down the name of that die set, the Scalloped Labels. And this one begins with a card base that is Evening Evergreen, 5.5 by 8.5. And another piece of the Designer Series paper, 4 inches by 5.25. I need my label. I'm going to have, again, 2 pine cones, large and small. And I'm going to have 3 sets of berries that I have pre-stamped and cut. So I've got 3. And then 1 more Evening Evergreen bow. So let's do our stamping first. I'm going to put this out here, and I'm going to bring in again my piercing mat. And these pine cones are crumb cake, so I'm going to use my crumb cake pad. And let's see, I think I need to clean the pine cone stamp so that I don't muddy up the crumb cake. So I'm using the chamois to clean. Ideally, I should use the Stampin' Scrub. The difference between the chamois and the scrub to clean, the chamois is perfect for getting the ink off the stamps. The Stampin' Scrub has more texture to it, so you can get down into those little deeper areas to get the ink out. But chamois is what I had handy, so let's move forward with that. So I'm going to start with the larger pine cone, and I'm going to do the same as I did with the early espresso. So I'm going to stamp off, and then stamp my pine cone. And again, it's photopolymer stamp, so I'm able to see right through and get it in position. I'm going to do my second inking. This is the detail stamp, step number 2, stamping off. And there's my larger pine cone. I'm going to do the same for the smaller pine cone. Start with the more solid image. That goes down first. And then I do step number 2 with the detail stamp and ink up. All right, there's my pine cones. I need to do also my sentiment and some pine branches on the label. So I'm going to start with my sentiment that says, "Have a Holly Jolly Christmas." I'm doing that in real red. And I prefer to tap, tap, tap rather than to just smush it into the ink pad. This one's a little bit tricky. I want to get that alignment right. And I want it about 1/4 inch from the stitching, pressing firmly. And there we go. So next I want to add my pine branches in Evening Evergreen, and I'm going to put 3, starting with the first, kind of in the middle at a slight angle. And then I'm going to come in off to the side. And then finally one a little bit higher. There we go. So let's start building our label. So we're layering up. Let's see, my berries are going to go around there. Some hanging off to the side. And then like so. And I am bringing in the pine cones on dimensionals. So let me get that in position. I can use the standard size dimensionals. And also for the smaller one, I'm just going to make sure I put it to the right. Okay, so let's give this a try. I'm going to sort of like flower arranging. So if you like to put down my larger piece first, and I'm going to bring it in like so, which means this is going to come over just a tiny bit. And since I already have that in position, so the dimensional's kind of stepping on that, but I want to add a little dot of glue right behind the berries so that they stay in position and they don't lift when you slip the card into an envelope. So the berries are flat adhered onto the label. The pine cones are lifted with some dimensionals. And then the smaller one's gonna go like so, I think. So I just need to add a little bit of glue right behind these berries here. And then I can add my smaller pine cone. And let's see. Let's kind of tuck it right in there. Now the label itself is going to go onto the card base, so let's go ahead and prepare the card base. It is the horizontal card base, 5.5 by 8.5, scored right in the middle at 4 1/4. My layer is 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm just putting a little snail trail of liquid glue. And here's where I want to check for orientation. These berries and branches are going vertically, so I want to make sure that they're not upside down at this point. And I'm going to have an equal border, about 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. Secure that down. And I'm going to do a little bit of burnishing with my bone folder. There we go. All right. And then finally, I'm going to come back in, add my scalloped label. I'm just putting some dimensionals, and I'm going to put one right in the middle. I'm going to secure this down like so. All right. And again, I have an Evening Evergreen bow. I'm going to secure that on with a glue dot. And it looks like I'm at the end of my roll of glue dot. Let's see if I can use that last one. There we go. Goes right underneath the smaller pine cone. I do want to trim this one up just a tiny bit. One of the tails is a little bit longer than the other. And my final step, I'm going to add my little pop of sparkle using my pick a tool. Take your pick. And I'm just going to bring the red gems up around the images. And let's see if I can tuck one in right there. All right, so there you go. These are the painted Christmas cards for November's card class. Card number 4. There's card number 3. And there's card number 2 and one more card. Card number 1, our painted Christmas card class for November. If you would like to receive the materials to make these cards, place an online order. Qualifying order is $35. Use the host code that I post up above the video. If you bump your order up to $50, I will include a pack of the wonderful gems along with the card kit so that you can create these Christmas cards as well. If you are local, I invite you to join the live in-person class on Saturday, November 20th. Card class is just $20 or free with a qualifying order. There you go. If you have any questions or comments, please post right below. I would love to hear what you think. Thank you so much for joining me.